the scene. He's got the voice that's mean, asking those questions that you never seen. He's got that fire, burning bright and clean. Andrew Keen making waves, break the routine on the Keen on show. He brings the heat, asking the minds, digging deep till they bleed. No sugar-coated truths, no lies to deceive. Andrew Keen, the master of the interview beat. He's got the knowledge, he's got the flair, challenging ideas with a fearless stare. With every question, he's uncovering what's there. Andrew Keen, a truth seeker, he's aware.
Hello, everybody. A few days ago, with an interesting show with David Daley. He's the author of an intriguing new book, Anti-Democratic: Inside the Far Right's 50-Year Plot to Control American Elections. The book is quite controversial, and it actually got a lot of reaction on the show. Daley has another face. He is a senior fellow of communications at FairVote, which is a nonprofit focused on trying to make America, I think, or at least the American democratic system, more democratic. We're not going to revisit the Republicans and the American democratic system today. I think we've spoken about this a little too often, but we do have the honor of having the president and CEO of FairVote, Meredith Sumpter, on the show. She's talking to us from her home in Arlington, Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. Meredith, tell me a little bit more about FairVote. What are you trying to do there in terms of improving the American political system? Would it be fair to say that you're trying to make American democracy more democratic?
Working at FairVote to make American democracy more representative and better functioning on behalf of the interest of everyday American voters. FairVote has been around for about 32 years, and we have a 3-decade plus track record of researching all of the key electoral reforms that have positive benefits for voters, for how we are represented, as well as how our government works on behalf of voters, tied, of course, to the structural incentives via our election system.
Meredith, there seems to be two dominant views of American democracy. On the one hand, it's strong. It was founded more than 200 years ago, 250 years ago, actually. In 2026, America will be celebrating its 250th anniversary. And people suggest that the arguments put forward on the division of power by the founding fathers are actually very strong. And there are others who argue that the American system, political system, is now archaic, that the principles of the founders on the Electoral College, the nature of Congress now are completely out of date in the early part of the 21st century. Which of those views do you think is more useful?
Andrew, I think perhaps it's both a combination of those two views. It's not one or the other. The story of America's democracy is one of ever constant movement and change and progress in how our government is representing the interest of the governed and how it is functioning on behalf of the governed. And I think that we're in one of those very important inflection points now.
What grade would you give the American political system in terms of representing the American citizenry, in terms of American democracy? Would it get a B, a C, an A?
I would be a fairly tough grader at this point, Andrew. Government isn't working for the majority of Americans, and they know it. Just 28% of Americans say our democracy is working. 85% of Americans, according to a Pew poll last year, say that they don't believe their elected officials care about what they want, and they're not wrong. Our democracy is in gridlock, and it has been for some time. Look, we're at the 118th Congress presently in 2024. It has passed 71 bills. And as a point of reference, the time that FairVote was founded 32 years ago, the 102nd Congress had passed 610 bills. So if you think about that, our government today is 10% as productive as what it was 32 years ago. And that absence of getting bills passed, getting things done, problems stacking up, that has impact. I think that there's a correlation between government gridlock and polarization and that deep dissatisfaction of the American people with the workings of our democracy. You know, voter turnout is high, but voter impact, they feel it, and it's true, their impact is actually low. And I think that is largely the story of where our system is now, and people like you and me, and as well as everyday folks who make up our democratic republic, are searching for new solutions. And for FairVote, it's a structural solution via our election systems to get government working again on the interests of the people that are being governed.
I want to get to that structural fix that people like yourselves at Fairview are pushing. I think the research that you were citing earlier, only 28% of Americans think that the US is a good example of democracy. 72% thinks it's used to be a good example. That was a Pew Research poll. But coming back to your critique, Meredith, you didn't give it a grade, by the way. I'm guessing it's probably closer to a C than a B.
C, or look, when you've
even
got,
a D. Are you going down to a D?
I don't. It could be a D plus in there. Look, the American people are not happy, and that shows. That really shows up. Less than 3 out of 10 Americans believe our government and our democracy is functioning well, and I think that I'm not quite sure that's a C. What do you think, Andrew? Would you give it a C?
It depends on whether you're doing the American or the British voting. American or British grading. I mean, a D, a low C in America is basically an F. But so you're not pessimistic. You're down personally and professionally on American democracy. But coming back to what you said earlier, you said there was gridlock. Wasn't that the point of the system? Didn't Madison argue in the Federalist Papers that we're not angels and that we need different branches of government to essentially cancel each other out? What's wrong with gridlock?
Well, in fact, actually, Andrew, I want to step back. I might be a hard grader on the way that our democracy is working to represent Americans currently, but I'm an optimist, and I believe that the sort of decency of the American people and their demands for government to work for them will eventually help us turn the page at this inflection point in how our government is working. Look, our founding fathers, as you know, Andrew, given your scholarship in this space as well, they wanted checks and balances. They wanted careful deliberation. But I think what we have now with the gridlock, there is very little to no deliberation. And there is a polarization that is keeping government from functioning and making progress on the very real challenges and opportunities facing the American people, whether it's immigration or good jobs, climate change, inequality. There's a whole cornucopia of issues that Americans of all political stripes are wanting progress, are demanding that their government represent them and solve these challenges and find new opportunities. We're a hopeful people, and we're a people that likes to get things done. So I think given the opportunity and the American people through the election system, this is how they get their government to respond to their needs. I'm confident that with time, you will see Americans, if not from the top down, then from the bottom up. And we're seeing that now at FairVote. Americans from the bottom up are demanding that their government works for them and that the people that they vote into office to represent them are enabled to serve the interests of the broader electorate and get these things done.
And I want to come to ranked choice voting in a few minutes. That's one of the big issues that you focus on at FairVote. But Meredith, the issues that you bring up, immigration, inequality, global warming, social media, they're ones that all Western democracies, all advanced democracies and non-democracies are struggling with. 30 years ago, or 40 or 50 years ago, the American political electoral system was still the same. You still had the two-party system. You still had the electoral college. You still had the three branches of government. And it seemed as if, maybe we're being slightly nostalgic, but it seems as if the system worked. So is the problem, rather than systemic or institutional or constitutional, is the problem one of political culture? And perhaps, as David Daley, I think, would argue, a problem with particularly one side of the political aisle?
I would say that the issue is one of the hyperpartisanship and the gerrymandering within our system that is politically incentivizing our elected officials to not work together to solve problems. I think that issue is much more prevalent today than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago, for sure. Just look at what happens when we have legislators who are trying to work across the aisle to address key problems that are facing our country and facing their voters. If they are working across the aisle, oftentimes, if they're coming from districts that have been drawn in ways that they're highly partisan, they actually are at a disadvantage. Their base could turn against them and their job security goes down. Versus if they do nothing. If you look at the re-election rate in Congress at a time when Congress has, as of May 2024, a 13% approval rating. And then again, I don't know if that's a C or a D for you, Andrew, but 13%
I think that's
approval
an
rating
F,
of Congress.
Meredith.
Okay,
Sounds
all
like
right.
an F to me.
But there is a 94% re-election rate, right? And the reason for that is because you just have a small fraction of congressional districts that are truly competitive. So over 90% of congressional districts are drawn to be either deep blue or deep red. And so to actually win your seat and keep your seat in power, it's not really in the general election, of course, it's in the primaries. And you have what, 10%, around 10 to 12% of American voters actually vote in those primaries, and they tend to be of more, let's say, of a strong view in their politics and have specific points of view. So in that way, I would say over the last 30 years or so, and increasingly what you find is that with those gerrymander districts, you win your election in the partisan primary, not in the general election. And so our elected officials are beholden not to the majority of the constituents that they represent, but rather to just their narrow base, which, if you just look at the turnout for primary voters across the American electorate, that's just 10% of American voters. So I think that's why it feels to the vast majority of Americans, like their political parties and their politicians are not listening to them and working on behalf of them, because it's our party primaries that have really stretched us toward those extremes. And again, it gets back to the perverse political incentives for elected leaders to win their seat and stay in power.
We did a show a couple of weeks ago with Lindsay Cormack. She has an interesting book, How to Raise a Citizen and Why It's Up to You to Do It, in which she suggests that we all have a responsibility, particularly as parents, to get our kids engaged, particularly in local politics. Could one respond to your critique, Meredith, and say, well, this is all very well, but the gerrymandered system is not good. It reflects a certain rottenness in politics, but that should encourage us all to become involved in local politics. So it's not just the local extremists who dominate the political agenda.
As a mother of four, Andrew, I would say absolutely yes. I think civic engagement is the kind of energy that we need now, and that's bipartisan or cross-partisan civic engagement. I think that's more easily done at the local level than it certainly has proven to be at the national level. But again, going back to the American people as the reason I'm optimistic about where we're going as a country, with the election reform that FairVote has been researching and advocating for all these many years, ranked choice voting and proportional ranked choice voting. We've been at this for 32 years, but really, Andrew, it's just in the last couple of years that we've reached an inflection point in seeing voters and local leaders from across the country stand up and say, we need to try something different to get our elections to work in ways that represent the interest of American people that make up their communities. And so it's gone from a reform that was just in a few localities to one that is currently the fastest growing election reform in the country. Just the last 27 city ballot measures in a row have gone for ranked choice voting. We could see this November a tripling of the number of states that are choosing to use a ranked ballots when they head to the polls. So again, I think what's exciting for us at FairVote is we've done the research. We've been tracking over 600 ranked choice voting elections over the past 20 plus years. We've got the data that demonstrates what this reform is capable of and what it can do. But it's really the demands of the American people that are causing this reform to be put on ballots or won in legislative measures because it works. And I think for us, that's really exciting to see that level of civic leadership and engagement coming from the ground up and showing what is possible when Americans feel engaged and empowered in the building of their country, from cities and to states and hopefully beyond.
I want to come to that bottom-up innovation. I've done shows before on ranked choice voting. I've interviewed Larry Diamond, perhaps the leading scholar, I think, in support of ranked choice voting. But not everyone, Meredith, as you know, will be familiar with what it means. It sounds rather complicated. Could you explain what ranked choice voting actually is?
I'd be glad to. And it's quite simple. It's easy. We rank things every day. So Andrew, if I asked you, what are your top 3 favorite movies, your top 3 favorite sports figures, or top 3 favorite restaurants, you'd think about it, but you'd be able to come up with an answer. Ranked choice voting does that for American voters in terms of who represent them. And the effect is realigning our incentives so that our government actually works in the interests of the voters who are putting these people into power. So ranked choice voting, it allows voters to rank their candidates in order of who they want. So if your first choice has no chance of winning, your vote counts toward your second choice, and so on. The effect is that it gives voters more say and more power over who represents them. But it's not just beneficial for voters. Elected leaders win and keep their seat of political power by well representing and meeting the needs of a majority of their constituents. And this is a very important point. Most Americans, when you talk with them about how their government is working and how democracy is working, there's a perception that their elected leaders enjoy a majority of voter support, and that is simply not the case. With our single winner elections currently, you have a lot of elected leaders that are getting with low pluralities of voter support. That could be 22%, it could be 30%. But with ranked choice voting, the requirement is that the winner has to win at least a majority of support of the constituents that they're seeking to represent. And it works easily in all types of elections here across the United States: primaries, generals, special elections, and it leads to more representative outcomes. And we think that's the reason why it's been growing so quickly over the past several years.
Meredith, are there countries that are pioneering ranked choice voting? The West European democracies seem in some ways more innovative. I'm guessing that one of the Scandinavian countries is somehow involved with ranked choice voting. And are they making it work?
So, ranked choice voting, it does work in different countries, different cultures, and in different contexts. The international example that is most cited, I would say, is Australia, which has successfully used ranked choice voting for a long time. And I think what's really important about it, when you think about it in the context of the United States, or you think about it in the context of another country or political culture, essentially it's a party neutral reform. So it doesn't matter what political party you come from. Essentially, it's a reform that benefits all voters, and it really benefits the political leaders who are the most competitive, who can demonstrate an ability to grow broad support across the voting populations and different coalitions within their jurisdictions in which they're trying to compete. So we've seen here in the States, we've seen both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party use ranked choice voting in their primaries, in part to identify who are the candidates who are going to be able to appeal and be able to compete well in a general election to positive effect.
You use the term party neutral reform, might be a euphemism. I'm guessing that in the closed system, the duopoly of American politics between the Republicans and the Democrats, there are many power brokers within the two parties who have gerrymandered the system, as you suggested, sort of divided it up to each of their own benefits, who would be opposed to ranked choice voting. What's been the official response, not at the local level, but at the national level within the Republican and the Democratic parties?
Well, I would say that for both parties, when we engage them on uses of ranked choice voting, the elements within both parties see the usefulness of ranked choice voting as a tool that enables each political party to get a fulsome sense, even within their party system, of where their party leaders are on a given issue, or on a particular candidate. And so it's a tool in a toolbox that the two establishment parties can use, and certainly independent and third parties also see benefit of it in terms of again increasing the competitiveness of the candidate that they eventually put forth to run in a general election. I think that's the primary use of it. But secondarily, and as we're talking to Democrats in Congress who use voting apps with ranked choice voting to be able to quickly whip the votes that they have on a particular issue, and see not just that first round of voting, what is everyone's first choice, or how would they vote on a given political issue, but if they had to have a multi-layered sense of what is the collective interest or will of a political party on a given issue or a given candidate, you just get a higher quality outcome of data when you use ranked choice voting to whip that support or to identify that candidate.
I mean, that's one side of it, but are you suggesting at FairVote that the American electoral system is changed so that at the national level, for House of Representatives, for the Senate, indeed for the presidency, that there be a ranked choice voting system? That would be a fundamental reform, a revolution of the system. It would certainly benefit third-party candidates. I know you've been on shows with Andrew Yang. Wouldn't it be an opportunity, for better or worse, to smash the two-party system?
I don't think ranked choice voting is we don't see it that way at all, Andrew. We actually see ranked choice voting as benefiting strong candidates. And the winners of these elections, they're candidates that tend to be strong in their party support and are also able to attract the support of voters who are outside of their strong party base. So it forces the candidate of, let's say, an establishment party to not just rest on their laurels and say, you know, I've got enough support of my own party base. I don't need to worry about or engage with voters who are not naturally going to vote with me anyway. I don't have to compete for their vote. It forces those candidates to both win that first choice support of their party base and then go out and secure the second vote or third vote support of people who might not naturally vote for them. So it's actually, it creates more competition in our election system at a time when that is sorely lacking. And on the flip side of that as well, it results in greater voter engagement with the people who are campaigning to represent them. And time again, you know, we have both sort of research data, but also anecdotal evidence from candidates who run in ranked choice voting elections. The winners understand that they need to compete differently in order to win. They can't just speak to the narrow party base. They have to be strong within their party, but they also have to show how their ideas, their policy concepts are in the greater interest of constituents within their jurisdiction who are outside of their party base. And that leads to more competitive elections, not just in the primary, but also in the general, that tend to be focused more on the issues rather than on the sort of typical mudslinging that you tend to see in more hyperpartisan or polarized elections that are in too many areas of our country at this stage.
I'm not a keen follower of Australian politics, but my understanding is that there's a lot of mudslinging there too. But you avoided the question of whether you think the electoral system should be changed. It's one thing to do it at a local level, but do you think the presidential election, for example, should be based on ranked choice voting?
Oh, I think it'd be terrific if the presidential election was based on ranked choice voting. It would open up that election to be one that is much more competitive. There would be more choices. I think you would see more candidates come to the fore and throw their hat in the ring, in part because you wouldn't have the same concerns about, let's say, splitting the vote or spoiler candidates and unrepresentative outcomes that can arise when more than two candidates run for a single position, which is what we have currently. So I think if you use ranked choice voting in both a presidential primary as well as in the general, what you would actually see is a more authentic representation of what voters think and who they want to lead them. Just imagine, Andrew, I know, we talk about spoiler every 4 years, and I tell you, it's a chronic problem here in American politics. Perot in 1992, Nader in 2000, Jill Stein in 2016, and now you've got RFK and Cornell and Jill here in 2024. It's the same chronic issue where how many voters choose not to vote for the independent candidate because they're concerned that they're going to waste their vote, and they end up voting for one of the two establishment candidates. In our current system, that gamemanship tends to happen. If you had a ranked choice voting system, the candidate can vote, or the voter can vote for who they sincerely want without fear of wasting their vote, because if their first choice has no chance of winning, of course, their vote would automatically count towards their second choice.
I take your point very briefly, because I know you've got to run. I'm guessing that the political parties, the two dominant parties, or the two only parties, the monopolistic or the duopoly in America, would be deeply opposed to this, because ranked choice voting and the way you're presenting it, certainly at a national level, is, for better or worse, an assault on the two-party system. It would enable the Andrew Yangs and Ross Perot's of the world to run independently.
Well, actually, I would disagree with you, Andrew. I think with the ranked choice voting system, the two establishment parties wouldn't have to worry about the spoiler problem. Even now, the Cook Political Report just released a new set of swing state polls this week. The third party vote in every state is higher than the Trump-Harris margin. We saw this in every decisive swing state in 2016 and in 2020 as well. So for the two political parties, the current system isn't really working for them as well, because that third party vote is spoiling the outcome of the election.
Do they acknowledge that? I mean, you run FairVote, so I'm guessing you talk on a daily basis to senior people in both political parties. Are they sympathetic? I mean, you're telling me that they should be on your side, but actually, are they?
They are interested, and we're looking to talk to as many political folks as possible, not just in the two establishment parties, but in third parties as well. Because essentially what you want is an authentic representation of voter will without splitting or spoiling the vote. And that's important to the establishment. That's also important to candidates who are not part of the establishment, who are trying to just throw their hat in the ring to be able to compete and to share their vision for how to lead the country forward. But I would say for the two establishment parties, I think what's interesting to them with the ranked choice voting system, when you apply it at the presidential level, is that, again, you wouldn't have that concern about spoiling the vote with that third party candidate in these critical swing states. And there wouldn't be that risk of having an elected leader at the White House who didn't have majority of voter support. And that's the chronic issue that we've had in U.S. presidential elections, as we've seen in the last several cycles, where you do have a third party candidate. Americans do vote for that third party candidate because they're not satisfied with the establishment choices, but it ends up spoiling the vote away from what would have been perhaps a majoritarian winner in that election.
A couple more questions, Meredith. Before you took over FairVote, you ran the Coalition for Inclusive Capitalism, which is a progressive organization, certainly more on the left than on the right. My sense, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, is much of the work, the initiative for reforming the American system structurally, institutionally, as you're doing at FairVote, is coming from the left rather than from the right, from people like yourself, as opposed to disillusioned conservatives. Is that true, or are there also many people, conservatives, people traditionally on the right, who are in favor of a fundamental reform of the American electoral system?
So, Andrew, I'd love to just correct one notion here. Creating value for everyday people, that is not a progressive value. In my work in launching Inclusive Capitalism, I was working with CEOs across sectors and geographies on the material aspects of how they were running their companies, taking account of things like how climate change and inequality was impacting their bottom line, their ability to create value for their shareholders, their ability to create profit in ways that would benefit their business environment versus undermine their business environment. So it was very much all about a focus on materiality and a focus on value creation that comes when you take account of the needs of your business environment and the material impacts of things like climate change and inequality to it. I think similarly, the need to reform our election system, this is not a Republican thing, it's not a Democrat thing, it's not a progressive thing, it's not a right thing. What it comes down to is, how is our government system delivering value for the everyday people that are being governed? And fundamentally, that is about democracy working. And that is something that when you look at the state campaigns that are currently coming to the fore, it's a mixture of campaigns that are happening in red states, in blue states. You have red supporters, you have blue supporters. But the common through line in all of this, Andrew, is just a desire to get government working again and to make progress on the challenges, that our communities and our economies are facing, but also to leverage the very real opportunities. And in that, when you talk to voters, when you talk to the local leaders who are running these campaigns and making the case for why changing the way we run our elections will help us structurally get our government working in ways that respond to the most important shareholder that we have here in the United States and in any representative democracy, that's the American people. That is something that is I would say it's not partisan at all. It's just really focused in on how are we creating value and serving the needs of the everyday people that our government seeks to govern. And that's why I'm in this work, and that's why I'm excited to take the work forward with the FairVote team.
Finally, Meredith, as I said, we had Lindsay Cormack on the show. She has one daughter, How to Raise a Citizen, which is an interesting book. As you suggested earlier, you have more than one child. You have 4 children. You're dedicated to making America politically, constitutionally a better place, enriching its citizenship. How do you raise your children, your 4 children, in terms of making them better citizens?
Oh, it's a wonderful question, Andrew. I think it is getting involved in your communities, having discussions at the dinner table about what's in the newspaper, allowing for free-flowing debate and for the diversity of views and perspectives. I myself, I'm born and raised Alaskan, and was raised in a conservative, almost libertarian state. And there is a wonderful diversity of ideas about how we can make progress on issues, and we're not always going to agree, but that's not the point. The point is, how can we come together and find those areas where there is commonality, and to make progress and see that through, while respecting the other person, respecting their dignity, and treating them with civility. And I think that is really foundational to how we need to operate as a people. You see that at the local level, those bonds of trust and civility. That's what we need to start repairing. I think at more of the meta level, and you can start at your dinner table, and I'm sure you do that with your own family, Andrew. But really, it's and with FairVote, when you think about ranked choice voting or proportional ranked choice voting, it's about how do you restructure the political incentives so that in order to be able to exercise political power to win your seat and keep your seat, you have to go out and engage with, listen to, and deliver for people who may not subscribe to your particular political views. That's government. That's governing. And that's the kind of bipartisan problem solving. It's never going to be perfect from one person's example or another. But the point is, we have to come together and agree on how we're going to progress forward. And I think that we're at an inflection point in this country where the American people are ready to be done with the drama and focus on what do we need to do to move the country forward. And to that, Andrew, I deeply appreciate all that you've done, both with your podcasts and your writings, to be able to help us explore where we are, the partisanship and polarization. How do we get beyond that to get back to a better functioning government, a better functioning democratic republic that authentically represents and meets the needs of the people that it seeks to govern. So thank you as well, Andrew, for contributing to that public and civic debate.
Meredith, you've got 4 kids. Can you rank choice them? Do you do that every day?
Oh, Lord, no, absolutely not. I love them all equally, and they're all joyful and wonderful, all very much different personalities who give their own sort of special sauce, if you will, to our day in and day out life, but also their perspectives to those dinner table conversations. And so I would just say, like, as a parent, it's just an absolute joy seeing these little minds emerge into their own independent thinking and being and doing. And I find that as a parent, I am learning from my children as much as I hope that they've been able to learn from my husband and me and our sort of politically diverse family members that all love them and all show up wonderfully in their lives.
Can I step on the scene? I'm ready to attack. Andrew Keene. Yeah, he's the one to bash. Asking questions, no filter, just keeps on grinning. He is the man who's got the whole crowd spinning. Money, fame, success, it's all in his sight. He'll dig deep, expose you with all his might. No sugarcoating, he'll cut right through. Andrew Keene, he's the one to spew. Yeah, he's an expert.